Hello, and it's good to be back. We missed last week. Angela had to had to do something, and it's good to be back this week. But it was also nice to have a little break, I have to tell you, for me anyway. It's hard to believe that it's Friday already. The week has just flown right by. Today's episode is going to be about, well, first of all, we're going to celebrate Angela's 15 years of sobriety. So, congratulations, Angela, on 15 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then we're gonna, I guess we'll, after that, if there's time, we will talk about the topic today, which is designing our own recovery, which is based from a reading from Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. And welcome to everybody in the chat room. I see Bobbert there, Kenneth, Joe, Angela, and there might be a few others out there that haven't said hello yet. So welcome. Good to have you here. So we're going to start with something special. Angela introduced me to a little song that she thought was appropriate for her anniversary, and we're going to go ahead and play that to start this episode. So here we go.
Drive, I like to pull off to the side of the road, turn out the lights, get out and look up at the sky. And I do this to remind me that I'm really, really tiny in the grand scheme of things, and sometimes this terrifies me. It's only really scary because it makes me feel serene in a way I never thought I'd be, because I've never been so grounded and so humbled and so one with everything. I am grounded, I am humbled, I am one with everything. Rock and roll is fun, but if you ever hear someone say you are huge, look at the moon, look at the stars, look at the sun, look at the ocean and the desert and the mountains and the sky. Say I am just inside a giant's eye. I am just a speck of dust inside a giant's eye. When I saw Jean-Pierre, I really liked it when she said what she said about the giant and the lemmings on the cliff. She said I like giants, especially girl giants, 'cause all girls feel too big sometimes, regardless of their size. When I go for a drive, I like to pull off to the side of the road and run and jump into the ocean in my clothes. I'm smaller than a poppy seed inside a great big bowl, and the ocean is a giant that can swallow me whole. So I swim for all salvation and I swim to save my soul, but my soul is just a whisper trapped inside a tornado. So I float to my back and I float and I sing. I am grounded, I am humbled, I am one with everything. I am grounded, I am humbled, I am one with everything. So I talked to Jean-Pierre and almost cried when she said that the giant on the cliff wished that she was dead, and the lemmings on the cliff wished that they were dead. So the giant told the lemmings why they ought to live instead. When she thought of all the reasons that they ought to live instead, it made her reconsider all the sad thoughts in her head. So thank you, Jean-Pierre, 'cause you take what is in your head, you make things that are so beautiful and share them with your friends. We all become important when we realize our goal should be to figure out our role within the context of the whole. And yeah, rock and roll is fun, but if you ever hear someone say you are huge, look at the moon, look at the stars, look at the sun, look at the ocean and the desert and the mountains and the sky. Say I am just a speck of dust inside a giant's eye. I am just a speck of dust inside a giant's eye. I am just a speck of dust inside a giant's eye. And I don't want to make her cry, 'cause I like giants.
Very nice. And
Are you okay over there?
my dog shaking around. That was my dog. She had itches or something going on. Sorry about that. To run such a beautiful song with my doggy back there. Well, Angela, 15 years. How about that?
Yeah, kind of crazy. Yeah. I don't know what else to say.
People are clapping.
At the moment.
Hey.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
how shall we celebrate? You want to just share what your thoughts are on this milestone?
You know, I shared a little bit at my meeting last night, but I haven't thought about it all that much. Because I'm not used to going to, in-person meetings. And that always seemed to be like a primer for it. And so I don't have a coin or anything. My friend Peg is going to give me one of hers, which is nice. Jonathan wasn't sure if it was legitimate if I didn't have a coin for it. But yeah, she's going to give me one. And yeah, it just seems like a strange thing to do, celebrate it, when I'm not interacting with, people. I mean, I am on YouTube and on social media, and then there are a couple of people that I'll meet with and go for a walk and stuff like that. But yeah, the COVID variant here is really really bad, and so we're at standard crisis care, and so so I can't really go out and do too much, but I am grateful, and I do love what I've seen is the changes within secular recovery and AA in the last couple of years. I think it's a great time to get and be sober. I mean, it doesn't feel like it sometimes because of the craziness of the world, but as far as access to recovery resources and people who are more open-minded and free thinkers, I mean, it's just amazing, and I love the connection. It feels like a small community, even though there's tons of people and it's all around the world now, and we know that, but it still just feels like a community, and I'm very, very grateful to it. I've shared my story several times, and it's on the podcast if you ever want to listen to it. I think it's 108 or 118 or something like that. And I told it several years ago there, and that one I think is funny because I was sharing my story at a traditional meeting, and so when I share in front of people who are more AA traditional I share it in a slightly different way than I do when I'm hanging out with my secular cohorts that speak my language a little bit more, and so I try to really relate to my story and how I do the steps, or how I did the steps, in a secular way for those people, so that they have an awareness that it can be done, and they have a resource of, seeing and hearing somebody who has, a little bit of long-term sobriety, and they can help other people who come in and may have similar issues with the 12-step program that I did, because sometimes it's not that people think you can't do it, it's they've never heard of people who, claim to be atheist or agnostic or free thinkers or whatever, and been able to stay sober without a higher power that they would recognize, as supernatural in some way. So yeah, and so that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. It all kind of mixes in with my recovery, is that I did design my own. And and it wasn't super intentional, like I'm gonna redo everything. It was just that I atheist, and what I was seeing was that you had to have God, and so I found a book that I had seen when I was in high school, the secular 12 steps. And I picked that up and asked my sponsor if we could do the steps using that book. And so we combined how she kind of did them anyway and that book. And then as I've gone along, I helped start a secular meeting in my area, and then use that book, have used that book to sponsor other people, and just kind of evolved my way of understanding, what AA is, 12-step programs in general, and the purpose, and created kind of, my own recovery program of things that seem to work well for me. And it's been great. So, and this song, I just love that song.
I do too, yeah.
One of my friends said that she was going to use it as a way of doing the 10th step for her, which I think is great, because kind of along with what we'll find in our reading today, I think the 10th step helps people who have done the previous steps, gain perspective on what's going on, on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of, taking what you've learned already and putting it into practice. And one of the main things we need to do is learn that, what we think isn't always accurate, and consider that there may be a different way of looking at things, and get help from people to start to understand that. And then that helps you with, becoming more intuitive on handling different issues, and full circle. So a particular thing I want to point out in that song that I really, really love was the second verse, when she talks about that she talked to her friend, Genevieve, and almost cried when she said that the giant on the cliff wished that she was dead, and the lemmings on the cliff wished that they were dead. So the giant told the lemmings why they ought to live instead. And when she thought up all the reasons that they ought to live instead, it made her reconsider all the sad things in her head. So I say, thank you, Genevieve, because you take what's in your head and you make things that are beautiful and share them with your friends. We all become important when we realize our goal should be to figure out our role within the context of the whole. And so I just, love that part, because I feel like that's what we do in recovery, when we go to meetings, even when we've been sober for, a number of years, is that we're talking about, the reasons why we stay in recovery, and the things we do to, maintain our recovery. And by sharing that with other people, it reminds us, why we do those things as well. And so, it brings back, what's important to us. And I know that there's been many times that I've been, kind of having a down day, and may not have it, recognize it, but talk to somebody in recovery who's also having a down day, and try to share my experience, strength, and hope on whatever is going on with them. And then I realized that I actually needed to hear that, and it makes me feel better by sharing my experience. And so that's kind of what recovery is, and the whole point of it. And then I feel like that second part of we become important when we realize our goal should be to figure out our role within the context of the whole is kind of where I'm at nowadays within recovery and in life in general. It's like, okay, I was able to get sober and to, learn a lot about my mental health and how to manage that, and, how to basically get along with people for the most part. It's a crazy world, so not always on point there, but, for the most part. And so, so what is, what is my role now? And it constantly changes and becomes new. And so what started out for me is just, trying to get sober and not be crazy, has turned into trying to help other people do something similar, and sharing, my translation of how I used AA and 12-step recovery to do that, and made it make sense for me in a way that is slightly different than what the actual words are in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous and in other more traditional literature.
Angela, we have a caller.
Okay.
Shall we take it?
Sure.
Okay. And she's calling, or he or she, I don't know, is calling from Columbia, Missouri.
Okay.
Oh, do the right one. Oh, how am I? What am I doing wrong? I'm sorry, guys. I guess the person hung up. I apologize. Oh, please call back if you can, from Columbia, Missouri. I'd love to hear from you. I just didn't notice that you were there. Sorry about that. Call back, please. All right, Angela. Sorry.
No problem. So that's kind of, the summary of my recovery and where I'm at and why I like that song. And the song actually relates to today's reading as well. So if you want to pull that up and read that, then we can.
I will do that. I will go ahead and do that. I guess I should do a screen share as well. Joe has a comment there. Her friend Genevieve was a real person.
Yes, yes. Let's see, what was her last name? Elverum. And she passed away at the age of 35 from pancreatic cancer, like 4 months after she gave birth to, I think, her daughter. And she was an artist and a musician and a poet, and just really sounds like an amazing person.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the reading now. Let me get this up. There we go. I don't know if you can read that or not, but I will read it for you. And as you all know, I'm a really good reader. So this is from September 17th. And let me move this over where I can see it better. Okay. September 17th. The future remains uncertain. There is no event there is no event. In reality, probability merely forms the starting point in our judgment of likelihood and our degree of belief concerning the future. When we then use logic, reason, and even intuition to argue our case. And this arguing is largely done with ourselves, making our belief in what will happen heavily subjective. For Dr. Strangelove's Game, A Brief History of Economic Genius by Paul Strathern, born in 1940. I'm going to get a little drink of water here. Oh, there we go. Okay. In his book, Strathern describes the theory and philosophy of economist John Keynes. That would be John Maynard Keynes, a British architect of monetary policy through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. Economists, like addicts, tend to fixate on the future. The price paid for ruminating about what might happen offers little improvement on the long odds of accurate predictions. But the longer we invest in our predictions, the stronger we defend them. In recovery, the present should offer all we can handle. We practice letting go of the idea of trying to will the future to our design. For some of us, the principle behind step 3 isn't so off putting. It's the wording. So we change the wording. Each of us has more at our disposal to define the recovery process than the original architects of the 12 steps did, not the least of which is decades of experience of what works and what doesn't. The wording isn't sacred. The original literature referred to adherence to spiritual principles, not rigid wording. However, a mastery of words will not give us the power to control the outcomes in our lives. T.H. Huxley invented the word agnostic in the 1800s to describe the impossibility of knowing how and why we exist or what guides us. Agnosticism simply means without knowledge. When we are at peace with being vulnerable to outcomes we can't completely control, we are living step 3. Do I get invested in my own expectations and theories? When I do, am I open to new ways of seeing, or do I vigorously defend my point of view? There is no event. Do I live as if my life will begin for real following some event, or once I am good enough or ready? Can I remember this is here, this is now? Good. And that
Yes.
is it. That's our topic. And would you you've been doing all the talking so far, but would you mind, Angela, opening us up with that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, it was interesting reading it today. And one thing I realized is that I've heard of Dr. Strangelove's, but I didn't know what it was, and so I had to look it up. And yeah, found out that it was a movie. Did you ever see it?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
That's the Cold War movie, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Strangelove, or how I learned to stop worrying
Yeah.
and love the bomb, and then it's like, a dark comedy
Yeah.
that's satires the Cold War thing.
Mhm.
And so so I'm like, okay, so then what does that have to do? Why did John comment on that, or Joe, why did he bring that into the readings, into his book? And so I Googled, when I Googled the Doctor Strange, that went to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Doctor Strange, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And so so I had to go through a couple of hoops to kind of understand where we were at with that, and the economists, and what is it, Keynesian economics and all of that. And so I'm like, okay, none of that actually matters to what the reading is. It's really, kind of step 3. And the way that it's worded, was definitely a problem for me when I got sober. It was the biggest hurdle of, before coming into AA, as well as once I got in, and people kept saying that, don't worry about it, you're not there yet, and so I'm like, okay, but yeah, it's there eventually, right? So I'm gonna have to get there someday. But yeah, so the phrasing is, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. And what does that have to do with this reading and everything else, that I've talked about today? And it's really about, to me, intentionality, so the made a decision is really, the intentionality and openness to possibility and perspective, or as many people call willingness. But yeah, that those things are what's, going together. And what Joe's talking about in this is being open to perspective, and to not being too invested in our own theories and our own belief of what's going on. And that's a serious issue for all of society right now, is believing too much in our own ideas of how things should be and how things should change. And, it goes into our recovery and into every aspect of our life. And I reflected a little bit on that in a short essay that was probably too long and most people didn't read, on my Facebook page, but about, how a life in a week in a person in long-term recovery, might go like. And so I shared my week last week. And part of it was, the reason I wasn't here is that my sister was in the hospital, that she doesn't have COVID, and it wasn't regarding COVID. She has a heart condition that, started last summer, and it's still something that we don't quite understand, because she's, only 35 years old. But it was acting up, and she couldn't get it under control. And so she had to be hospitalized, and was in there for over a week. And so I went to visit her. She's about 2 hours away, and I needed to do that. On Friday, they only allow one visitor per 24 hours. And then right after she got admitted, they went into the managed care thing, and so nobody else was admitted to the hospital, and so yeah, so I had that on my mind, and I went to go do that, and then I got attacked by her bidet, and it was nice to see that other people have had bidet issues as well, because I've never had one or lived in a place with one, and so and she's in a tiny place that was built in, like, I think 1920, and so the toilet is right next to the shower,
Right.
and you can't get like a foot in between them. It's crazy. And so the shower curtain was covering the actual handle of the toilet, and so I couldn't see it. So I thought that it was somehow intermixed with the bidet function thing, so the little knob for that. And so I turned around and went to turn that, and got covered. I mean, it shot me with water all down the front of me, and it was definitely an I Love Lucy moment, because I'm like trying to figure out how to turn it off, and I'm getting drenched, and yeah, it was ridiculous. So I'm like, all right, this is how today's going. I got it. Fortunately, I brought a change of clothes, because I didn't know how the day was going to go. And so I was able to change it to clothes. And then I got outside, and there was a downpour. So, I had to accept that I was going to be soggy that day, that's just the way that day was going to go, and went with that. And so I did get to spend some time with my sister, which was really nice. And learn a little bit more about what was going on with her and what they were trying to do there. And we listened to some musicals, watched some musicals on the laptop. And then, one of my closest friends is moving. And so Jonathan and I went to take some things off her hands, some DVDs and books and games. And I went to go through the games to give some to my mom. And so there are some, more family oriented games, which is her preference. I had a couple of games that she did not enjoy playing that were more, adult oriented, like Cards Against Humanity, not one to play with your church going mom. And so one of the games that was in the pile was a game for Disney trivia. And so I opened that up to make sure everything was in there. And there was like one of those tiny bottles of whiskey. And one, I've never understood why those even exist. It's like, I don't know anybody who has a problem or who doesn't have a problem that just wants one of those things. They just seem so silly to me to even exist. But yeah, I was surprised. And so I had John come and take it and dispose of it. And just because I was still in shock that it was there. It was, like one of the most unexpected things, to be in there.
And it was so neatly packaged.
It was so neatly packaged. Yeah. So I sent a picture to my friends because, the main friend is in recovery as well. And her partner is, very much an advocate for us. And all they could figure out is they don't know when the last time that game was played. And they think that it might have been, high school, and that, that my friend's partner has been just carrying it around from, place to place with her since then. And so it was likely very, very old. But anyway, yeah, it was hilarious. And they were in shock too, that happened, and no clue that was in there or how long it had been there. But yeah, so I had that, a couple of things that I wasn't expecting that I handled. But then, I got a text from somebody who I know in recovery, saying they had met somebody who was only, 13 days sober, and would I talk to them? And so, I'm like, sure. And so I chatted with that person, and yeah, they'd never been to an AA meeting. They didn't, hadn't gone to a counselor or anything. I guess, the breaking straw of, what was going on with them was realizing that they were missing out on family life events and stuff because of their drinking, because, they were hungover, and that they just felt like they couldn't live this life anymore. And so, yeah, so we chatted about kind of what AA is, what 12-step recovery might look like, what Zoom meetings are about, what's expected at a Zoom meeting, and other ideas, SMART recovery, Dharma recovery, how to find those people in counseling and stuff. And then connected her, with other meetings and Zoom meetings and lists and stuff like that. So I was of service that way. And then on Tuesday, I had couples counseling with my partner, and it was important for me to list all this out, I think, because in Facebook and personal Facebook pages, there's a lot of people that aren't in recovery. I do have quite a few that are my friends in recovery, all across the world. But there's also quite a few of the people that I'm friends with that aren't. And that gives them an idea, and it reminds them that, there is somebody that they know that's in recovery, and that, you don't have to be, that stereotypical person living under the bridge. You can be, but, that you don't have to be to, reach out to ask somebody for some kind of help. And also, just kind of what a person's life is like, and how mine might be different than it was. And, in some ways it's not different than 15 years ago. I still have life events. My family still has, struggles. I still have a lot to learn. But also it's very different in that, yeah, I recognize those things, and I don't throw a temper tantrum because, the bidet attacked me, or because, my friend gave me something that actually had booze in it. How
Yeah.
dare they? They're just trying to sabotage me. Everybody is, the world's against me. And yeah, no, none of that. It's just I kind of go through life and I take it day by day. And yes, I can do planning now, but I don't get too attached to it. And I think that's part of what this reading is about is, yeah, I go through and I make plans and, think about the future now. I just don't get super attached to what I want it to be. Sometimes actually I do in my mind, and then I find myself disappointed and I have to rethink about, oh, wow, I had an attachment, as the Buddhists say, oh, yeah, you were attached, that's why you're feeling that way. You're attached. And so, yeah, so I try not to be, I try to be, a little more neutral, to hold things lightly, to hold ideas lightly, and positions on things. One thing I like about changing the name of this podcast and what we do is that, I can talk about things like the pandemic. And, and sometimes, I found myself, thinking like a fascist, and that, I was getting frustrated because, my friends are in healthcare and them having to deal with what's going on, and they're getting attacked, literally physically attacked sometimes by patients when they have to tell the patients that, yeah, you just tested positive for COVID. And so I get mad that, and part of me, was like, well, I don't think anybody who's been, who's chosen not to get vaccinated should get, healthcare, should, be able to go to the hospital. And, and I had to realize that that's a very slippery slope, when you start doing that. Yes, there's part of me that is angry and thinks that it's unfair, and crisis care is unfair of what's happening right now. But, once you do that, then, what comes next? Then do they say that they don't have to treat, or they shouldn't treat alcoholics because, they know that alcohol is bad for them and they, chose not to stop drinking? Do they then do that for people who, are diabetic or, have weight issues? Where do we decide on who does and doesn't get care based on, what their choices are? And so, yeah, having to deal with, that within myself, that, oh, yeah, I can get like that as well. I can make decisions or ideas or get, there's a part of me that, yeah, that can become a fascist, and that can be a liberal fascist, and that can be a thing. And, and I wasn't aware of that before. So knowing that that's a possibility, and being able to, look at myself and really, be okay. Not that I have a fascist side, but that's a possibility within me, is really important, because, without that goes unchallenged, and I can become a person that I don't want to be, and I can contribute more to the problem rather than to trying to, live as an example, as part of, solutions, possible solutions that we all can live with and want to be a part of. So yeah, so I really identify with this reading and with the song that we played, and that's where I'm at in my recovery, is being open to all sorts of things. I often joke about simulation theory. And today I had a conversation with a friend on, we were sitting in our yard, and I, we had just had a conversation of a couple of different ideas of alternate realities and many planets and stuff like that, theories of reality. And I'm like, if you were an alien and you came to, another caller.
Yep.
All right, we'll go to aliens next.
All right, we'll take this call, and it's from Stuart, Florida. I love that I can say what city it's from. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, this is Al from Vero Beach, Florida.
I thought it was Al. Good to hear
Hey,
from
Al.
Hey, congratulations, Angela.
Thank
what a
you.
wonderful job.
Thank
the
you.
Big 15. This is the best year. It's also the most dangerous year. Now, whatever, if that makes sense, it's beyond me. But you
Yeah.
hear that a lot in AA.
Yeah, pretty much on
Okay, there we go.
every year, every birthday. It's like, oh, this is the best and the most dangerous. Most people go out this year. Be
Yeah,
careful.
right. All the same sentence. They got you. But yeah, the topic sort of caught my eye tonight. I was at my Friday secular meeting, which I thoroughly enjoy, and it was Josie's reading, and it got on the third step, and it seems like we're unable to call. We call it traditional AA, and to me, I got sober in 1984, and to me, that was traditional AA. We were allowed to question everything. It just wasn't. It wasn't keep your mouth shut and put the cotton in the ears bull stuff. Crap.
Yeah.
So, but at the meeting, we got on this third. It was everybody's talking about the third step. The third step. So I don't know if they were talking traditional steps, the practical steps, the modern steps, whatever. One guy had even written his own third step. And I'm just thinking, listening to all this, faith-based recovery is traditional AA today. I mean, it is as religious as you can get. It just is. And we have a problem. To me, we're in two groups now. We're definitely AA meetings. We have secular meetings, and we have faith-based meetings. And that's my opinion. That's the way it seems to be going. And why do we even have to consider in secular meetings racking our brains on something called the third step? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
It's just we're sort of separate, but we're not. I don't know if that makes any sense. We are secular, and there's a lot of great books on recovery. Even if you have to, if you're hung up on the number 12 and have to do the 12 steps. I know you like that stuff, Angela. I hear you talking tonight, but to me, it's just, I'm sort of like, what's your buddy there, John Huey?
Oh yeah.
I'm a couple years older and a couple of years more sober, but or longer sober, I should say. But I wanted to get away from that stuff over in the faith-based meetings. I want to get over in the secular end, and there's so much more in therapy and things we can do and talk about. The whole meeting was hung up on God as we understood Him. So I'm just blowing some steam off tonight, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, I get it, and so my reason for still talking about it and stuff is that I don't describe in my daily day how I use the third step today or anything like that. My thing on the steps is that the majority of English speaking countries still AA is the main thing, and that within those it seems that the religious aspect that came into AA in the 90s, because I've heard from so many people that have been sober, as long as you are within that group, that AA was just, it was different during the 80s, that it wasn't as religiously adhered to. The big book wasn't revered as, the end all be all, but it became that. And that's still how it is in the majority of the country. And so, talking about the steps in a secular way, so still translating them is helpful to people who think like us, but don't feel like they have many options. They need, community, or they've needed community. So they go to those meetings, but they need a way to translate it so that they can still be part of that community and stay sober. And so I think it's kind of an evolutionary thing of moving from that into a spot where you're like, you know what, I don't actually need to do a third step. The third step isn't important to me in my daily recovery anymore. But I think there's an in between. And so that's what I try to to share within my recovery is what the in-between could be for people, what might make sense for them as they're going through that.
Yep. That's how I am too. I'm like,
that makes a lot.
mhm. Yeah, I'm like, and I think Angela's the same way. It's like, we're not, I'm not like that hung up on the steps. I don't really care about them one way or the other. I mean, they were important to me at one time, less important to me now. But there are a lot of people that we run into in the secular AA community for whom the steps are important. And if that's the roadmap they're going to use, then we can find our own language to talk about that. But yeah, I've arrived at the point where I'm at now in my life where I don't need to talk about my recovery in terms of the steps, but other people do, and I run across those people all the time, and I can do that. I can talk. I can go through the steps in a really practical way using my own language. One thing I found interesting about Joe's reading is he talks about how, we can do that, how we can use our own words. And, the truth of the matter is that anybody who reads anything, whether it be the 12 steps or any book, you always kind of process it in your brain anyway, the way that you think about it. So it's like, we always have done this. We have always interpreted these things, we've always had to. It's just that we just never wrote it out or spoke it, but we always kind of thought it. And, with me on step 3, it was always the decision part. And that was actually taught to me by the traditionalists when I was very early in recovery. They had me focus on the decision and less on the God part. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. And it was that John Huey, I agree with him on so much. It's just that he's just like angry about it,
Adamant. He's very adamant. And
you gotta like the guy. He puts it
oh,
out
he's
there.
fun. I like him a lot. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I think he's cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you for calling.
Yeah,
go ahead. You have more to say. It's fine. I'm sorry.
Just a little bit here. I always hope that for some reason AA would change the it wasn't always this hardcore stuff, but it did change. It evolved all right. It evolved into the really hard, and they're doubling down on their stuff now. They're not even want to associate with secular people or secular meetings. And new people coming in, they don't know what the heck's going on. They don't need to hear all that. In my opinion, faith-based AA stuff. But yeah, I guess it makes sense we can communicate better, but I'm not quite sure about that. Okay, John, Angela, congratulations. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you for calling, Al. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I'm sitting here debating with people in the chat room.
Yeah. No, I don't pay attention on. Yeah.
I don't know. Normally, I'm not like so involved. I'm debating about John Maynard Keynes and the gold standard and who did it, and crazy.
Yeah, important stuff to our recovery. So yeah. My understanding is Obama based his economic goals and law ideas on Keynes. But anyway,
okay.
So going back to recovery, I think that. I definitely understand where John Huey and Al are coming from, and can see that. I just see that people go through different stages of development in all of the stuff that they do. So not just in recovery, in life. So I can recognize when I went from being a standard Christian to being a more open-minded, liberal kind of United Methodist Christian. Jesus is a hippie type of person, and and as a civil rights leader, basically, of that time. To I don't know about this. that I can jump through these hoops anymore, so yeah, so I guess, agnostic to, no, I'm definitely an atheist. And so, yeah, so it was stages. It wasn't like I just went
Exactly,
one
same here.
day, from one thing to another. It was
That's
as I
right.
continued to learn, and, slowly
Yep.
it was, an evolution. And
Absolutely,
that,
exactly the same thing with
yeah,
me, and I
and
think the
that,
best thing you can do is kinda help someone, meet them where they are now, if
right,
that's where they
yeah. And
are now, let them know
that's
that's
what,
great, you know?
yeah, what I felt like AA, ideally, has been to, a lot of people, is that, yeah, they go to meetings, they feel like they're, accepted, and then we help each other by sharing, what we've done, not what you should do, and what you have to call yourself, in order to, get help or to get caring or loving. My main role, I learned, from, my sponsor, was that, my role as a sponsor was to just love the person until they could love themselves. So it wasn't just get somebody through a step or through the steps or, anything like that. It was just basically being available to somebody and being caring about what they're going through and relating, my struggle with, getting sober and the stuff that I do and did do, and so it wasn't a lot of defining, who you are and what you believe in, but that's the main reason why we have, secular meetings and stuff, is that, it wasn't meeting people's needs, and enough people came along and started talking about that they created the meetings, where they felt like they could talk, and share in a way that, made them, feel heard, and that they could relate to better. So, that's why they were created. And I think that, that yes, AA is changing. Again, I don't know that it'll still be AA, that they'll still call it that, or if there will always be something called AA, or if we'll view it in a historical context of, there was a thing called AA, and there were a lot of, meetings that came out of it, and
Yeah,
now it's
definitely.
just recovery in general,
Mhm.
but I think, that this pandemic has, caused, such a disruption in the world that people are, have had to change how they
Yeah.
think about work, how they think about their recovery, how they think about life, what's important to them, is going to concerts as important as they thought it was, what can they live with, what can't they, live without. And it's true for, recovery as well. And so we see all of these meetings and information being exchanged on ways to get sober. And I think that'll all, mesh up, and I think more kinds of meetings and more kinds of recovery, and ways of, thinking about, addiction, or, as I like to think about it, in Gabor Mate, as, responses, instead of somebody having depression, as a disease. It's, a depression response. So stop, making everything a disease, including alcoholism, that it's a response to, something that's happened, not always, a successful strategy, but yeah, there's lots of different ways to think about things. And, yeah, what is Jackie saying? Bill W. was a salesman and marketeer. He would surely change with the wind. I do think he would be down with secular AA for sure. Yeah, I think that he would have, really continued with, exploring the, LSD, for, helping alcoholics as well. He was into that, and I think he would have continued and gone further into that if his cohorts were not, concerned about what that was doing for, AA and the image of AA. But yeah, that's another thing that's coming up, is that that new forms of therapy for people who have addiction issues or substance issues are starting to be explored. There's lots of research that's going on about it, and so I think that there will probably be better ways for people to deal with it, and that may or may not include groups talking about and communities like ours. It may be that that will devolve into different kinds of communities, and so there won't be substance abuse recovery communities, because we won't be looking at it as substance abuse anymore. And so so there's all sorts of possibilities, which brought me back to the whole alien discussion this afternoon, which was, if you were an alien and you came to Earth for the first time, what would you try to communicate with first? What do you think the most intelligent thing is? And we got to that from kind of talking about Russia and China and different things going on within global geopolitics and stuff, and so it just made me think, because we always think that the aliens are going to come and talk to us Americans, and that's the way to go. And I decided trees, and that I could picture an alien trying to communicate with a tree. And then what if aliens can communicate with trees, and what if trees are communicating with us right now and we don't know it? And and so then that kind of devolves into, we know why I don't use drugs now, because I don't need them to think weird things. And possibilities of things. My newest thing that I think is interesting is the idea that as evolved beings, we learn to, our primary objective is to stay alive and to propagate, right? That's the main thing that our bodies, and our organism does, is to try to, sustain itself and to keep, our systems alive and our species alive. Yet sleep is not something that we do that's helpful to that. When we're sleeping, we're not procreating, we're not trying to get food, we're not able to defend ourselves. And so what if sleep is our natural state? That's what humans are supposed to do, is be asleep. And so then what is this part for? What if sleep is our reality and then this is something else, And so, so I love thinking about stuff like that and exploring different ideas. And I find it comforting, because, it definitely depersonalizes global geopolitics. China's not out to get me. We're all asleep. That's how we're supposed to be. And this is just something, like a group delusion that we're, all in on. And or, we're in a simulation, and there's lots of different simulation theories. And, that makes sense to me too, because, if you're an AI and you're learning as fast as we see them, self-learning now, what would you do after, 10 years? Well, you'd probably create AIs like us to understand things. And so that one is kind of cool and fun to contemplate sometimes. That, the one that people don't like is the idea that they're a non-player character or an NPC, because, that feels kind of blah, like there's no purpose or whatever. And there might not be. And so, to close this all out, that's kind of how I live now, is that I'm okay with, all these different ideas, and exploring them, both for finding meaning in life and purpose, and also, for in recovery, for things that are going to be helpful to me and to other people, on, what ways that, will make them feel better and live a more meaningful life, be in less pain. I really don't think the purpose of our life is to be happy. It's nice when you are, and when that's part of your life, but I don't, that's not my idea of how things go. I could definitely be wrong, and that's part of this whole discussion, is keeping things open and recognizing that we have a bias towards what we think make sense. And it could be that none of it makes sense, and it won't ever make sense, and we won't ever quite understand. And that's okay too.
Wow.
So
This has been one of the best anniversary talks that I think I've heard in a long time. Let's give Angela a round of applause. Yay!
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on, nothingness and no.
Oh
Yeah.
no, I like what you say though, because it's I like thinking about that too. It calms me down to think about the universe and how big it is, and it's not like I'm some kind of I'm not brilliant at all, but I'm fascinated by black holes, and just to stop and think about black holes, for me, just it's I don't know, for some reason it just makes me feel better. And it's like that song too, we're just a speck, it's like for some reason just putting that in perspective kind of helps me. And that whole alien things, Neil deGrasse Tyson says if aliens came here, they wouldn't want to talk to us because we aren't evolved enough. They'd just look at us as some kind of, some kind of like an animal or something.
Yeah,
But,
exactly. Yeah. Or what if they are us, from the future or from, the past, trying to see if we've evolved enough yet to talk to,
Yeah.
and who knows? But yeah.
Wow.
With nihilism, I get that a lot, Anchor. I'm really not a nihilist. I'm just okay with it, So yeah,
I am too. The purpose of life is whatever I bring to it, in my opinion.
yeah, it could be, and it could
Whatever
be
purpose I
something
want.
completely different. We could be like all little consciousness and trainings. We
Yep.
could be just,
Oh,
a simulation that somebody, that a more intelligent being is using to try to understand what happened at this point in Earth's history, why it went to shit and we blew ourselves up, I mean, yeah. And it all makes me feel, a little bit, it makes it less personal.
yeah.
Whatever's going on in the world and all this stuff that's out of my control, So I'm
Yeah,
tripping the
before we
life
leave, the other thing I
fantastic.
wanted to point
Yes.
out that you said that I really liked is you were talking about how COVID was a disruption and how
Mm-hmm.
it's caused us all to rethink everything, including our recovery and
Mm-hmm.
how we experience our recovery. Man, nothing could be truer. And even though it's been a difficult time for a lot of us, it's been no doubt about it. I do think that a lot of good will come out of this. Like, there are a lot more resources available now. There are groups springing up. That's another thing you said that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
I liked. You talked about the possible evolution of AA could be that, yeah, it just brings off into other little things, other things, and they'll say, yeah, it was once AA, but now it's all this other stuff. And I almost
Right.
see that happening with all these different groups that are forming for different
Mm-hmm.
types of interest, and it's just a matter of people coming together and supporting one another in their recovery and their desire to stay sober, which seems to be the universal thing that helps
Right.
people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And Bo asks, what does all this theoretical woo have to do with staying sober? And well, what it is evolution, that at least, for me, and, John said that as well, in our sobriety and our recovery, that's what it's been, is an evolution of understanding what recovery is, who we are, what our life is, what we want it to be, what we have control over, what we don't, and considering that, yeah, maybe there's more, maybe there's not, and and that, yeah, and so it very much has to do with, or I guess it doesn't have to do with being dry, because being dry is just one aspect of recovery to me, and it's not the whole point. I do have people that I know who just stay dry, and they're pretty miserable. And for me, my recovery is about that. When I don't drink, I have opportunity to be an agent for change in my own life and in the world. And that might, be effective, and it might be an illusion. And that's where the theoretical stuff comes in, is that, I'm at a place where it doesn't matter to me whether, I know reality or not. I'm able to think about things in a variety of ways and not, lose my mind or drink over them because they're not the way I think they should be. So that's what we're talking about and why it relates.
Now, the last word here. I got a message earlier that I'll be speaking at the Free Thinkers Living Sober group on Sunday, but it's actually Sunday, September the 26th, and that's what I thought. What it is Free Thinkers Living Sober. They are doing a workshop on varieties of secular experience, navigating AA in a secular way. So I'm going to speak on that, and it says on their website it's on September 26th that I will be the speaker there. So anyway, I maybe I'll show up this Sunday anyway, just in case they have me booked for this Sunday, and I'll be ready. Plus, it'll be nice to hear what other people have to say on that topic. So that'll be fun. David said that he got sober at the beginning of lockdown. So the end of COVID restrictions had me rethinking what next. Isn't that interesting? A lot of people are like that too, David. Started off with online meetings. So anyway, thank you everybody for being with us and for participating, and thank you for calling in, Al. Thank you everybody who was participating in the chat room. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye with just our standard outro song. Take care, everybody.